Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to facilitate and moderate this session today called Back on the Journey Towards Seamless Travel, where we're looking at the role of digital identity in this new world that we're living in now. We have some great participants and speakers, and I'm expecting a great conversation. So to start, I'd like to just do a quick round of introductions, and I think we'll start with Annette.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. Great to join. My name is Annette Steinbergen. I have a background in international border management, focus a lot on public-private cooperation, and the last 8-9 years, I focused on digital identity in travel, and I was co-initiator and co-founder of the Aruba Happy Flow in 2015. And have worked on that ever since, expanded into health credentials now with verification of that into the mix because of COVID. And I keep learning and learning because there is so much happening in this space. It's very exciting. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Annette. Ciaran?
Thank you, Chris, and good day to everybody. My name's Ciaran Carolan. My background is in development and implementation of IT systems for border management and for police cooperation. Currently, I'm working for ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. I'm the person responsible for the ICAO Public Key Directory, PKD. And within that role, I'm obviously touching upon not just the verification of the credentials that are used for identity attestation and travel, but also the development and implementation of those credentials. It's an area where there's a lot happening currently. We'll speak about, I think, the drivers behind that move towards seamless travel. We're looking at tools, we're looking at capabilities, we're looking at processes, we're looking at capacity building, and I'm really looking forward to discussing with you and all the panelists some of those aspects today.
Great. Thanks, Ciaran. George?
Hey, first of all, thanks for pulling us all together and really excited to be on this panel. My name's George Merritt. I am 2 months in, or 1 month in, as Senior Vice President of Operations at PANGIAM. It's a company focused on trusted movement, and joined here because I was previously at Denver International Airport, where I was overseeing terminal operations and our public-private partnerships in identity management and this seamless travel. So really excited to be here and talk to this group.
Very cool. Well, thank you all for joining. I was able to participate in this because I worked with Laura and the team in my role at the Airport Innovation Accelerator. And I bring that up because as we look at digital identity in aviation now, it's really not a new concept. It's more like an idea that has come to its maturity, its time in the market. I remember back, Annette, to the first promotions of Happy Flow in Aruba and the connected experience that everybody wanted, and the idea that technology was scaling in such a way that it's possible. Can you start and take us back to how you approached that program and some of the thoughts you had when you formed it?
Well, it came together by chance because we wanted to do something innovative with passenger facilitation, and we were basically given the free hand, and that's when the good stuff happens. And we developed what was a locally federated identity management system, basically, where you enrolled at the first step, which was with a kiosk at check-in. And what happened there was basically the first step of border control. Crossing a border, immigration checks who you are, and then can you cross the border in or out. So that first step of who you are, we use that as the basis for the federated identity management system. And that happened at the first step. That was the enrollment. So the government authenticated your identity, verified who you were, biometric verification, of course, and then we created a token, and each of the stakeholders that were joining, which was the airline, KLM, and the airport authorities, would receive from that token the data they were allowed to have or authorized to have and need to have to do their work. Which for the airline was, of course, all the personal data, but not all the personal biographical data from a passport, but what was needed. And the airport had just the fact that you are somebody with a valid travel document and you have a reservation for a flight, because that's all they needed to know. And then it was biometric at every step that would verify you. And the underlying workflow management supported a very efficient system. And for the passenger was eccentric, and it created a uniform process. So it's not like, am I here with my passport and my boarding card? But it was just face. So it's works really well. And we, while developing, realized there are so many more possibilities when you do this. Why not connect off airport stakeholders? How about the arrival process? But we're now 7 years later. This was in 2015 when we started. So we continued with a Happy Flow 2.0, as we baptized it. And that was pretty much underway when in March 2020, we confronted, the whole world was confronted with COVID. And at that moment, we were also stuck with the fact that we realized we needed a digital self-sovereign identity if we wanted to make an arrival process whereby you could send your digital passport data, basically, before you arrived, have it verified, and use it on airport and at arrivals with a car rental and a hotel. So it stopped, and we were busy with other things in Aruba, like opening up the island, making it safe, which we did pretty well. And of course, the health credentials came in the mix, so that needed to be solved. And now we picked up where we left off. And we're in a different world. Self-sovereign identity is not a far-fetched idea anymore. The DTC Type 1 specifications are out there. And so we're looking at using a self-sovereign identity for our passengers who want to arrive in Aruba, use biometrics for the arrival process. Of course, we work GDPR compliant, so informed consent is and the retracting of consent is possible, and use biometrics on arrival, but also for hotel check-in, car rental pickup, etc. That is still in our focus, and we hope to continue with that very, very soon.
Yeah, that's exciting. The acronym GDPR, I mean, that's a big thing for the privacy and the management of personal information, because there are CIF fines, and that ends up, I think, being one of the complicating factors of interoperable system and sharing of identities is you have to trust that the other party is going to use it the way that it's supposed to. And I'm wondering if this is a carry-on question to Ciaran, and talking a little bit about how ICAO is approaching it with your program. I don't know if you'd be willing to talk about PKD and where you're headed, but it seems like interoperability and the idea of a public-private partnership is something that you're investigating right now.
Yeah, definitely, and thanks for the great question, Chris. So let's say, taking as a diving point off the original question to Annette, that this is not a new concept. Seamless travel, where we've been working, is not a new concept, and that's certainly the case for ICAO as well. Annette mentioned DTC, the Digital Travel Credential, which is something that ICAO and its expert working groups have been working on for many years, pre-pandemic, and that's building, of course, on the electronic passport, which I think you could say is the underpinning element behind all of this digitization of biometric and biographic information in a portable and internationally standardized format that can be utilized in travel. DTC takes that a step beyond and dematerializes the passport to an extent, taking that information out of the paper document and having it possible to be a self-contained envelope that can be shared over networks or ported to other physical forms, such as a smartphone, mobile phone, or any other physical form of that nature. So these things have been going on as concepts for a number of years pre-pandemic. What we're seeing with the pandemic now is a concretization of the fact that these things are necessary, that they're demanded by passengers, they're demanded by stakeholders in the aviation chain, private sector and indeed public sector. So governments, airlines, airports, integrators, technology companies, all playing a role in this space, all seeing the need, of course, for different reasons, but all of them have their own reasons to require implementation of seamless and contactless travel. So whereas we were originally focusing on the credential, shall I say, the DTC, actually we're looking a little bit beyond just a pure implementation of the credential now. We're looking at processes, we're looking at capabilities, we're looking at capacity building. So you mentioned, Chris, the PKD, and I think that's a good example. We have for many years, again, spoken about opening up PKD usage to the private sector. We've considered it, spoken about the merits, spoken about the mechanisms, and debated for long periods of time how to do it without ever, let's say, taking that bite and saying, okay, let's do it. COVID came, of course, the pandemic came, and this created increased demand, first of all, but it also created the incentives and the environment to bite the bullet, should we say, and really look at this more concretely than we have done. So in December of 2021, so just a few months ago, we launched a pilot project for private sector use of PKD data within solutions that are provided by the private sector. So these can be solutions provided by technology companies, by airports, by airlines, or by combinations of those parties working together to give them the capability. It's not forcing, but it's giving them the capability to verify electronic travel documents, so currently e-passports, in future DTC. And Annette also mentioned the advent of health credentials. We've also been introducing formats for encoding vaccination information, test information, and also giving these are electronically encoded. Our format is the visible digital seal. And this pilot is giving the private sector entities the possibility to verify the health credentials as well. So to verify not only at the point of check, but potentially through advancedly submitted information. DTC can submit identity information in advance of EDS. You can submit health information in advance. Have all this electronically verified and pre-cleared so that you can have seamless travel, potentially like Annette has spoken about with Aruba, facilitated through biometrics as the key that links each touch point. So you collect everything up front and use something like the biometric, like the facial image at each touch point subsequently. So the interesting thing about the pilot is that it's not a compulsion. It's not requiring any company to do this, but we have 15 companies currently participating in the pilot. And we believe that there's strong incentivization for them to be part of this because we see with COVID the stress and the hassle of manual checks of documentation. You can upstream that and do it in an automated manner, then I believe that makes business sense. So that's what we're looking at. We're going to assemble information from these companies in the next 1 to 2 months, gather their experiences, their insights, challenges experienced, hopefully benefits obtained, and from there chart our path forward. It's an interesting time, I would say.
I love how you posed it, which is we've transitioned from admiring the opportunity to actually taking some action and moving forward. I have a follow-up question quickly. You know, the 15 participants that you have in the pilot, can you give a little background on what is their background? What is their market that they're focused on? Where are they based geographically? Or is it diverse? What are you finding from the participants?
Yes, so the majority of the companies are the technology companies. We do have airlines in there as well. We have spoken to airports, but none of them have currently engaged and signed the agreements that we require to participate. But at least there has been some indications of potential interest, let's say, moving forward, which we can consider in the future. But for now, it's mainly technology companies. They're geographically spread widely across several different continents. And we participate in events like this and highlight the pilot because we want to be open and transparent and clear to as many companies as possible that this opportunity is there. We're not limiting it. And we want everybody to have the opportunity, if they're interested, to participate in the pilot. And let's see how we map the case forward to make it more concrete, to make it a solution rather than a pilot. But in principle, we will retain that openness. And we're doing our best to reach out to all companies on all continents that might play a role in this space, because I think it's clear. Annette mentioned hotels. She mentioned, I don't know, the taxi drivers, the Ubers. There's a lot of companies in that space, in the travel continuum alone. Let's not deal with other elements where there is potentially a role. So we need to make sure that we consider these in a sensible framework, not get too diverse, not just be scattergun, but do it in a cohesive, structured framework, but make sure that those who can benefit from these capabilities, I'm not saying just the companies benefiting, what I'm speaking about is the passengers benefiting, the airlines, the airports, the aviation ecosystem benefiting, that we try to make sure that they can realize these benefits in a sensible way.
I love it. I mean, I think that's the essence of it, is where's the value that we're extracting, not just the digital identity on its own, or and I think it will be interesting, George, is to add your thoughts, both where you are now and also your experience with Denver International Airport, because you've been working on this seamless vision for some time.
Yeah, and I think Ciaran really hit on something important. You know, we were talking prior to recording this about what a small community this is, and we all are aware of this. But I think the real sea change that I think is out there is when we can tie this together so that, you know, that family that travels twice a year, there's an easy mechanism for them to tie all of these things together. And I think that's really important. But just to respond to your question, Chris, I'll sort of start from where I came from at Denver and end up where I am now to highlight just sort of the flexibility of what this sort of thing we call seamless travel means. So, you know, when I was at Denver, and I'll give a ton of credit to my former CEO, Kim Day, and our COO at the time, Chris McLaughlin, who's now in Dallas, really understanding that COVID was a seminal moment, in the moment. You know, I'm talking March of 2020. And we sat down to say, okay, how are we going to give just a little bit of confidence back to our travelers? And we created a pathway through our airport that was an app-based reservation system. We've all probably sat down and said, you know, let's create open table at the checkpoint, right? And so we developed this, but we put a really strong health element in it. So to access your reservation at our checkpoint, you had to, at the time, take your temperature at the checkpoint, but also, you know, respond to it was a very long list of questions. But for that, providing that information, we gave you a pathway through the airport only for these sort of really health conscious travelers. So pathway through the checkpoint, and actually a reserved train car on the internal train system out to our concourses. And we did that. We went from sort of idea to implementation in about 6 months. We were up and running in September. And it was very much an MVP. It wobbled like any really fresh idea. But what we saw was passengers really respond when we would get our surveys back. I've never seen a program that got more really enthusiastically positive, because you had people at that time that frankly didn't want to be traveling and get a pathway through the airport and really respond to that. So that was a really important thing to see. And then, you know, you bring that forward through COVID, and now sort of, you know, as much as we can call it a post-pandemic era, where the crowds are back, and now, you know, we airports and really everyone is struggling to get staff at cashiers, and to get staff at checkpoints, and to get you know, do that staff, and that digital tool to provide customers with that level of service and actually give them something extra when we're struggling to staff, I think is really important. We have a pilot program with Delta and TSA in Atlanta that is tying together for the automated bag check-in and the TDC with TSA. And it is really exciting. They're moving very slowly with SkyMiles members who are pre-check. We're underscoring the known in known travelers to move appropriately. But being able to give travelers that experience, if you come in with global entry into the U.S. and it's just your face and you're not even pulling out your passport, it's really an aha moment of what the future can look like, from arrival to bag drop to check-in to through security, concessions, all of that. Once you build that digital relationship with a customer, then it's really up to them how many touch points they want to have, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's great, George. I remember watching that launch of your program out at Denver, and it's becoming a popular thing, the reservation system, the queuing. But I think you made a point at the end that I'd love to hear Annette's thoughts on the federated identity and the idea that it's sovereign, that as a passenger you own your identity and you allow people to use it for different transactions. How did you approach that, Annette, or how are you thinking about it now as we get into more use cases and extending it to other parties?
Well, the original, it's a very good question, because this is a difficult topic. And this is exactly what everybody right now is trying to figure out how to do it. So the original Happy Flow was a locally federated identity management system, on a local platform, temporarily. We would throw away the data the moment the airplane left. And now what we really want is to leverage the fact that put the passenger even more central, in control. And that is by sharing your data before you go, and then having the government verify it. This is great for the passenger because they'll arrive very smoothly. They know that they're okay to travel. And for the government, they know beforehand they have verified identity data that they can run against watch list, etc. So this is not so much federated as more self-sovereign. And what right now the way passenger facilitation works is based on rules and standards. ICAO, of course, the Annex 9 is crucial in this. And the airline is the broker of the data, because they need to identify a passenger before they fly, and they need to share API, the Advanced Passenger Information, and PNR Gov. And this system is crucial, and this all stems from countering terrorism and transnational organized crime, because we need to have good passenger data. And I see in the future that'll change, because if we do it self-sovereign, I will share my data with the government that I intend to go to. They have correct data that they can verify with Ciaran's PKD, and they know exactly who's coming. They don't have to rely on an airline agent that quickly swipes a passport, but doesn't check whether the document they're holding is actually my document. And that binding of the document to the holder and then having it verified and using the data you receive in advance on arrival to match against, that is crucial. And that's not just crucial for what George mentioned, a much better passenger facilitation, a much better experience, but this is where both facilitation and security, safety and security, are equal. And that's where, and it's both matched. And this is a crucial development, because I've mentioned this before many times, and I realized this when we developed the first Happy Flow. If you do use an identity management and you all know you have the same identity, there's a uniform data set, you can leverage it in so many ways, and it's a real 50-50 of a better experience and a safer experience. And so it makes the passenger happy, but all the stakeholders in the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to tie back to one of George's points about digital identity that I find fascinating. Is I do think it ends up being a foundation for automation and self-service in a way that passengers want, but the operators need, especially as the talent pool, the amount of people working is a real problem that isn't going to be solved right away. I'm curious, Ciaran, do you have any thoughts on the sovereign identity, or how are you approaching it from the ICAO perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd fully agree with what Annette said in terms of our current focus in terms of passenger data that we do utilize in a facilitation sense comes from the carrier, comes from the airline. It's founded on API and PNR. And within the international context, API and PNR are collected, and we have international framework for their collection based on UN Security Council resolutions. So fundamentally, they are data collected for security purposes, and we try to intelligently or unintelligently, I don't know, utilize some of that data for facilitation. For example, plug it into an automated border control gate. We have some anticipation of who's coming. And it's all mediated outside of the control of the traveler. They make their reservation, they check in, and the data flows. There's no consent to that explicitly by the passenger. At least it's an implicit consent based on your booking. The interesting thing about the DTC is that changes that model. Not that API and PNR become redundant. I see that airlines will still have to collect that information and send it. They'll be able to collect it more easily because it'll be transmitted in an electronic form, potentially in advance. It won't require that physical swipe, hopefully in most cases. But more important, on the facilitation side, it gives the passenger control to say, I want to send my data, my DTC, my biographic, my biometric data, whatever it might be, to this entity to provide me facilitation at this particular step in the process. And it can be one step, it can be two steps, it can be multi-step. I send it to everybody within the traveler chain. I consent to share it with those parties, and they provide me facilitation end to end by integrating it all. So it puts the passenger in control of who they send what to. You can do it on one end, and then maybe your point of destination, you say, oh, I'm not so comfortable with that, or vice versa, and I do it one side and not the other. So it provides individualization of treatment in a way that bulk transmission like API and PNR simply cannot do. Now, there has to be more than simply I send my DTC. Obviously, there has to be discrimination of which data goes to whom, and that needs to be controlled in our model at the local level, at the national level. We already see that with API and PNR information. The health-related information might go to the health authority. Law enforcement related information goes to the law enforcement authority. So that has to be controlled locally. It has to be transparent, and it has to be clear what the passenger is consenting to send what to whom. But the model is very, very much changing. And this fits back to where I started in my previous question, PKD, verification of the DTC, verification of the identity information, the health information. If you have this model of I choose to send my data to this party, that party probably has to verify it for this to work. So it becomes more and more crucial that the individual stakeholders within the chain have the capacity to do that verification, which is why, again, public sector, private sector, all need to be able to have these capabilities and play their role in the full value chain.
Yeah. You know, it's fascinating. Here in the US, the mobile driver's license is getting a lot of momentum. And one of the critical points here is the bounding of the identity, the verification that it's a real person and that it's not fraudulent ends up being key. And I think that's where organizing bodies, governments are going to play a critical role, where commercial entities can't do it in the same way. There's just that absence of trust. But I'm, as we finish out this session, I think Laura has us closing up in a few minutes. I'm curious, we're at this almost post-pandemic, knock on wood, state, George. Where can this go? I mean, I'll ask you, George, first. You have this pilot going on in Atlanta. It's proving the process, but I think it's also gaining customer buy-in. I think that's been if there's a silver lining of the pandemic, people are willing to engage in order to get touchless and seamless benefits. They'll give their information in a way that maybe years ago they wouldn't have been as willing. But where do you see potential? Where do you see this going from your side?
I think that's the exciting part, and I'll give Annette credit again. I think she nailed it, saying you get higher customer service and higher security, and that's if you think about sort of the fundamentals of the pre-check program in the U.S. The exchange is, I will give you a little bit more information about me to make you give you confidence I'm not here to do bad things. And for that, I get a better customer experience, and it's really elegant. And I think when you take that and extend it, then from the travel sector, it's every part of the journey, from checking in at a hotel without needing to stop at a desk, to every time I get in an Uber or Lyft and the driver turns around and says, "Are you George?" and I go, "Yeah," I think, wow, we could do this in a much more secure way. Right through the trip through the airport, where you're checking bags without having to wait in a line, or it's the we have the fundamentals in place to say, maybe it's when I check my bag, or when I come through security, but somewhere someone should say, "Hey, George, usually on the other side of security, you get a cup of coffee and a muffin. Can we get that ready for you?" And have that be instantaneous. And I think when you have that relationship with a customer, whether it's through an airline app or something else, then you get a lot of benefit. And I think there are a lot of use cases from. I'm surprised we're not seeing a lot more low cost carriers really focus on this from how do we reduce costs and drive revenue, all the way to a really high end concierge service where you're getting really special treatment. So the sky's really the limit. I think you'll see access control be from everything, from a healthcare facility to airports to any place where right now we're scanning a badge, be something that really takes off from here. And I get really excited about it.
Annette, do you see the same thing, the idea of a personalized experience, the idea that it's connected in many different ways?
Oh, I do. I do think sky's the limit. But I also see the fact that if we take this see this in a global perspective, we cross borders, so we cross different legal systems, and we are talking about our most personal private data and our biometrics. So if this is not done with the highest privacy and data protection rules and regulations, there will be no trust. Because so for instance, if Hotel X says anything is possible with biometrics, and we'll give you a great service, and there's all kinds of incentives, and then all that gets stolen, the impact on that hotel and the trust on that hotel has such a huge impact on their business and their revenue. So trust is the key word, and you will not get trust if you do not ensure and are transparent about what you do with the data. And we are able now to just use signals and say, this is a verified identity. You don't need to know who I am, but I am verified, and with a hash to my biometrics that can be used. So we should really use the data minimization possibilities that this offers, and that creates a lot of trust. So that's a bit of a cautionary remark, but that is because I think the sky is the limit, but there's a but. if we do this, if we get
Sure.
the trust.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking back to some of the initial biometric launches and some airline conversations where they deliberately didn't want the biometric. They're like, don't give it to me. I don't want the liability. And I think that will continue because there is some brand reputation that can be tarnished if there is something like that. And I'm curious, Ciaran, to fill it out. I mean, you have 15 company or groups that are participating willingly in this. Many of them are tech companies, right? Typically, they're leaning into emerging trends and they know something. I'm curious what they see from your, why are they participating in this? What do you see as the trajectory?
Yeah, I think part of it is that to engage in this verification step is not simply about doing the verification task itself, but it's having the capabilities to link it all together, to store the data in an appropriate way, to use it, and to potentially provide services to other private sector stakeholders in that space, to be essentially a data management platform, an identity management facilitator in an ecosystem. So I said earlier that maybe each party along the chain needs to have its capabilities. Each one doesn't necessarily have to have all its capabilities. One can rely on the other. One can take the burden of having the very stringent privacy and security mechanisms, and then, for example, provide tokens and facilitation to provide indicators to others in the chain that whatever information they need to know and need to have checks out appropriately for this passenger. So I think that's probably why we're seeing more the technology companies in this pilot right now. But like I say, we're open, and others can test and try. Just to really highlight that what we're sharing within the PKD is public keys. It's not private information. So participation in our pilot is not giving something to a company that that's vulnerable to leakage that can disrupt their reputation. It's what you do with those, that what you get from the passenger, and you verify. That's when the cautionary principles have to apply, and whether every private sector entity in the value chain is comfortable using and storing all that personal information that they might verify using these public keys is a separate question. And obviously that's something that each company needs to think long and hard about and make sure if they do take the plunge that they're doing so with full consideration of all pertinent and relevant information, legislation, regulations, reputational principles, etc.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, I want to thank you all for joining the panel. It's fascinating. It's a sort of an exciting time for digital identity and aviation, and we're lucky to have you in the industry to move us forward. So thank you for your time. Laura, back over to you.